He was very selective about his students, and I was fortunate enough to be one of them. He made us feel as if we could be like him. I mean, I think I think inside he joked about that, but he didn't give us that feeling, you know. He thought that as a selected student of his, he would develop a kind of musical thinking that was his. And we could never be that way because he was a genius. We were very worried about whether we were able to answer questions that he had for us, you know, because he was way ahead of us in a way. And we learned a lot of new things that we never had before in our back training. It was a wonderful experience, but he was a very tough teacher, and he would certainly harshly criticize you if you didn't know what you were doing, you know. He had us thinking about how we could be very, very careful and selective about choices we made when we tried to write original music. And he was very clear in correcting us when we showed him what we were doing. And we were always amazed at his knowledge, you know. You know, you had this strange feeling if he didn't bawl you out, he wasn't interested in you. I mean, it was absurd, you know. And you get the feeling that he wondered why he selected you. That's a hell of a feeling, you know. We always marveled at his complete knowledge of how to do things and what choices to make. He was completely so enveloped and so deep in music that he knew things that other teachers didn't know about, you know, and that was marvelous. And being a first-rate composer, I mean, a world-class composer, we were astounded at what he was doing. It wasn't just an open class, you know. He selected the students, not Yale, even though we were at Yale. And Yale understood that because he was such a brilliant composer. The school felt they had to be wary of him because he was so demanding and so strict that I think that I wonder if they wondered if it was wise to choose him because he could be terribly strict and mean. Teachers I'd had at Juilliard, I mean, he was so far above them that even when we were hurt by what he was saying, he was terribly critical if you weren't up to it, you know. And he didn't want to waste time with people who didn't understand what he was saying, you know. He was an institute within an institute. And sometimes when he had to be away in Europe, we felt lost without him, you know. It's an odd experience. You loved him and you hated him. He could be terribly difficult with you. But the fact that he selected you was always a safety thing, you know. You felt, why did he pick me? And when I was selected, I felt so great. But there were times when I'd go home in a very sad mood because of, he could be very critical, very, very critical. And I always had the feeling that he could just kick me out, you know. And I think all of us felt that way, you know. And in a way, we had to watch out that we didn't sound like him, because they'd say, "Oh, you're another, you know, a student of his," you know. But we couldn't help from learning from him, and we had to. And sometimes we sounded like him, and some students would criticize us for that. Students who probably tried to get in and didn't, you know. He was terribly upset that he couldn't get a cab, and he had to be at a certain place at a certain time. And he knew I had a car. I used to drive him around. I'd drive him home, And he knew I had a car, and he rushed over to me and he said, "Please give me a ride to this place," you know. And I saved him because he was very upset about being late, you know. As harsh as he was, sometimes he would have, for his limited number of students that he had, he would have parties at his house. And we would go there, and we'd have cake and coffee or whatever. And he would do that quite often. His wife was a lovely person, and I just loved her. She was so kind. She felt that she had to make up for him in a way. I think he felt he had to be that way to get us, to shake us up from the training that we had, and it was so far beyond that, you know. I was so taken by his music, I just couldn't get over it, you know. This is great stuff, you know. And it's not that I wasn't able to understand other composers' music, but his was very special. It was unique. I tried to be like him in a way, in being very expectant of a student when I chose him, just as he was with us. And because I don't want to waste time with people that don't know what you're talking about, you know. And that was one of the most important things, I think, when we had students. We tried to be like him, you know, but we could never be like him. So many students tried to study with him, and when I found out that I was one of his students, I was thrilled to be a student of Paul Hindemith, a world-famous composer, you know. He was so knowledgeable about everything in music. I mean, it was just beyond belief. I think he was one of the great composers of the 20th century, no doubt about that.